and welcome back for our conclusion of Floors, where we left off. Oh my goodness, things seemed to be in a big mess because Miss Sparks fired everyone, and then miraculously Merganser showed back up. Milton actually ended up being George Powell, Merganser's oldest and dearest friend, and they showed up and gave Leo the silver key card along with the deed to the hotel and left us hanging with a little bit of a mystery statement of we have to take care of some house cleaning. And so here we go with chapter 16 to see what Merganser was talking about. Chapter 16, All is Revealed. If there was one thing Leo could say for sure about Merganser DeWippet, it was this. The guy knew how to make an entrance. It began all the way up on the 7th floor where he donned his hat and glasses. He knocked on all the guests' doors, and each time he turned away and flipped the collar up on the coat so that his face could not be seen. "Is it time already?" one of the guests said. "I trust everything went as planned." "Yes, everything exactly as we planned it," said George, whom the guest only knew as Milton, Bernard Frescobaldi's driver. "Meet us in the lobby, won't you?" "I look forward to concluding our business, Mr. Frescobaldi," said the guest, but Bernard was already gone down the stairs until he had summoned every single guest to the lobby. He had sent Leo ahead to find his father, and the two maintenance men waited at the bottom of the wide staircase as Merganser DeWippet, fully disguised as Bernard Frescobaldi, strode down the steps. Mrs. Sparks saw him first. "Who on earth is that?" she said, one eye on the mysterious man in the long gray coat and one on the front door. She seemed to be pondering whether or not to run, though it was hard to say why. There was something about this man she recognized. Merganser reached the bottom of the stairs as the guests started arriving, some by the main elevator, some by the stairs, all of them curious. "I'll have you know that mornings are my best writing hours," said Theodore Bump. "You may have just cost me 5,000 words. This better be important." Captain Rickenbacker was not a morning person, and he arrived with his red cape tucked into his trousers. "Has anyone made coffee?" was all he said. The Yanceys huddled together in their matching black silk pajamas, completely confused. Lillian Pompadour sat Heine on the floor, where he promptly peed. "Pilar!" Miss Sparks yelled, and it was only after she heard her own voice that she remembered she'd fired the maid the night before. She looked around the room, and her eyes landed on Leo. "You! Clean that up!" "Yes, ma'am," said Leo, who always carried a can of carpet cleaning foam and rags in his tool bag, just in case. "Is someone going to tell us why we're here?" asked Mr. Yancey. "If not, I believe I'll go back to my room. I'd like to make sure nothing gets stolen." It was a jab Leo didn't like to hear, especially from a paying customer at the hotel he now owned. Merganser had remained quiet, seated in the darkest corner of the lobby, but now he snapped his fingers. His best friend in all the world came down the stairs. "George Powell," said Miss Sparks. "What are you doing here?" Miss Sparks was alarmed because Mr. Powell never came to the hotel. She'd only ever seen him in his private legal office 7 blocks away, and even then, very rarely. "Who's George Powell? You mean him?" asked Lillian Pompadour, pointing at the short man arriving at the bottom of the stairs. "Well, that's Milton, not George." Miss Sparks smelled a rat, looking at the door once more, and came out from behind the check-in counter. "What's the meaning of this, George?" Miss Sparks demanded. "I believe I'll let him tell you," George said, pointing to Merganser. And when he did, Merganser threw off the disguise, and everyone gasped, for they all knew who it was in an instant. "My apologies for gathering you all so early, but I'm afraid it was unavoidable," Merganser began without the slightest hesitation. Miss Sparks was utterly speechless as George Powell unlocked the hotel door, and Mr. Phipps came in, back to looking every bit the gardener. "I'm only here for a moment, and then I must go, this time for good," said Merganser. "Just a few loose ends to tie up, then I'm off." "But you're not Mr. Whippet," said Lillian Pompadour. "You're Bernard Frescobaldi, and he's Milton, your driver." Oh, I'm afraid not, said Merganser, looking at all the long-term guests. He walked over to Theodore Bump, who had been with the hotel for 2 years running. As Bernard Frescobaldi, Merganser had called Mr. Bump on several occasions, offering money for causing chaos at the hotel. Each time, Theodore Bump had refused. Keep writing those books, said Merganser. I'm a very fast reader, you know. I do hope you'll stay on after I'm gone. Keep Blop out of my room and you've got a deal. Merganser glanced at Leo, who nodded. Done, said Mr. Whippet. Leo had finished cleaning up after Heine by then and stood next to his dad, wondering where this was all going. And you, said Merganser, stopping in front of Captain Rickenbacker. What will the Whippet do if you don't protect us from Mr. M, Bernard had called Captain Rickenbacker to the gate on 2 occasions, asking for dastardly favors, but Captain Rickenbacker had never wavered. You can count on me, said Captain Rickenbacker, saluting Merganser enthusiastically. Merganser bent down and picked up Heine. Lillian Pompadour had been inching her way towards the door, but when Merganser picked up her dog, she stopped. Give me my dog and I'll be on my way, she said. Miss Pompadour, you are all too willing. My husband has a lot of money, more than you, I'm sure, she fired back. He just might buy this hotel right out from under you. Merganser handed Miss Pompadour her dog. She held him close and looked as if she might start crying. Then why did you do it, Miss Pompadour? Why did you agree to sabotage the hotel? Because you said, Bernard said, it would drive down the price. You said we could own it together. But Lillian, said Merganser, far too kindly for someone who had totally betrayed him, you just said you could buy it out from under me. No, that's not true. I said my husband could buy it, said Lillian. And then she began to cry, holding Heine close to her chest. My ex-husband, if you want the truth. But Merganser already knew about that. It was why he knew Lillian might betray him. But he also knew the real reason why, and this softened his heart. Where will I go? Asked Lillian. The Whippet is the only home I've got. I'm all out of money. It's just me and Heine now. You love the Whippet, don't you, Lillian? Asked Merganser. I do, and I'm sorry. I'm very, very, very sorry. Captain Rickenbacker put an arm around Lillian and patted her gently. He petted the dog because the 2 of them were close friends. I could use Heine, said Captain Rickenbacker. He's a good sniffer. And I see a marvelous story here, said Theodore Bump. It could be my biggest seller yet, but I'll need to interview the young lady. Lillian Pompadour brightened at the sound of the word young and stepped a little closer to Mr. Bump. She looked at Merganser as if he held her whole life on a delicate string. Merganser glanced once more at Leo, who nodded very slightly. Of course you can stay, said Merganser de-Whippet, but you'll have to do some work around here. No one gets by for free. Lillian beamed, but it was the last straw for Miss Sparks, who had watched the proceedings with increasing discomfort. You must evict her, Mr. Whippet. She can't be trusted, she yelled. None of this lot can be trusted. Oh, this hotel has become a den of liars, scoundrels, and reckless, rude children. I will not stand for it. Merganser was a gentle soul, but every now and then, when duty called, he could be a lion. He walked up to Miss Sparks, looking down his long, elegant nose as she leaned away from him. He stood so close, the beehive hairdo pointed toward the wall behind her. And then he spoke. I don't want to alarm the guests, but you, Miss Sparks, are fired. You can't fire me! I'm the hotel manager, she shouted. Merganser snuck his hand into her jacket pocket and pulled the long diamond necklace out slowly. My necklace, said Nancy Yancey, snatching it away from Merganser almost before he could get it all the way out into the open. Everyone gasped at once, even Mr. Phipps, who was nearly unflappable. "Mr. Fillmore, would you please escort Miss Sparks out of the hotel?" asked Merganser. Clarence Fillmore was the biggest man in the room by a country mile, and before Miss Sparks knew it, he was standing at her side. "You can't fire me! You can't!" cried Miss Sparks. "Actually, you're right about that," said Merganser. "I can't fire you." Miss Sparks looked momentarily triumphant, holding her head high. She might prevail over this weakling after all. "Leo, have you the key card and the deed?" asked Merganser. Leo came to the middle of the room and pulled out the rarest of the Whippet key cards, and Miss Sparks nearly fell over backward. Mr. Fillmore knew about the card too. They all did, and none of them could believe Leo was holding it. But how?" Miss Sparks stammered. "You are all witnesses here, each and every one of you," said Merganser de Whippet. "I hereby sell the Whippet Hotel and everything in it to Leo Fillmore for the price of..." He glanced back and forth around the room until he saw the one thing that Leo held in his hand. "I sell the Whippet Hotel and everything in it to Leo Fillmore for the price of 1 bottle of carpet cleaner." It was all theatrics. But Leo handed Merganser the bottle of carpet cleaner, which was then handed to George Powell for safekeeping. Leo held up the deed for everyone to see, and then he looked at Miss Sparks. "You're fired," he said. Miss Sparks started taking things off the check-in desk, anything she could put her hands on, the appointment book, the pens, pads of paper. Mr. Fillmore took them all back one by one and ushered her to the door. Leo smiled from ear to ear. Oh, could it get any better? He didn't think so as Miss Sparks screamed on her way out. "This won't be the last you see of me, Leo Fillmore!" Merganser de Whippet looked at George. "Oh, how did I ever manage to hire that woman to begin with?" "You see the best in people," said George. "But I'll admit, you have to look awfully hard to find anything good in that one. She can be pretty deceptive." Merganser leaned in close to Leo and gave him a piece of advice. "Know thy enemy." Leo nodded because he understood. Miss Sparks would do almost anything to gain back control of the Whippet. Maybe it wasn't really the last time he would see her. A stillness invaded the lobby, and Merganser ushered everyone into the puzzle room where he had one more surprise before his departure. "This one is for you, Mr. Phipps, and you, Captain Rickenbacker." He took a black key card out of his pocket, swiped the surface back and forth and back again with his elegantly long finger, and the puzzle pieces began to rise into the air. All 800,000 of them. It was like a puzzle snowstorm over the long table, and everyone laughed. "How?" asked Mr. Phipps. "I could tell you how each piece has its own magnet," said Merganser. "And I could tell you about the complex system of magnets in the table and throughout the room, but let's just say it's a bit of magic, shall we?" "Works for me," said Captain Rickenbacker. Merganser swiped the black key card again, and pieces started to fall into place. The room filled with the sound of snapping as thousands of puzzle pieces locked into place. Leo thought it was the most spectacular thing he had ever seen. When it was done, there were indeed 223 ducks, including Betty and the other resident ducks, all 6 of them waddling toward a bright green pond. There were trees and a blue sky, the grounds with their giant topiaries, and the Whippet Hotel right in the middle of it all. "Not bad," said Leo. "Not bad at all." It had been the most magical of mornings, but Leo still had a certain emptiness inside that he could not shake. He tapped George on the shoulder, hoping for one last favor. "I wonder if you might play the part of Milton one last time," asked Leo. "There's someone I need to go find." "I was hoping you might ask," said George. He donned his driving cap and bowed to the new owner of the Whippet Hotel. "After you, sir." And they were off. Chapter 17. Goodbye for now. Leo stood in front of a door that reminded him of how thankful he was to be living at the Whippet Hotel. The building in which the door found its home was not cared for the way a building should be. Leo had spied hundreds of things he would have liked to have fixed on the way up, and he was sure there were thousands more. If I owned this building, it would be in much better shape, said Leo. That's the spirit, said George. Maybe you will own it one day. Leo looked across at his companion and wondered how that would be possible. Better knock, time's a-wasting, George encouraged. And so Leo did knock, softly at first, and then louder because he was so excited. When Pilar saw him, her eyes brightened. Leo, how did you? She seemed to let the question go as it trailed off, suddenly happy for her son. Oh, Remilio is going to be so happy to see you. The hotel is all he talks about. Pilar let them in, and Leo's heart sank a little. She had done her best to fix up the one-bedroom apartment, but there's only so much a mom could do with cracked windows, ancient appliances, and holes in the walls. You've really fixed it up nicely, said George, holding out his hand. I'm George Powell. I work for Mr. Whippet. Oh, said Pilar, not sure what to make of the small man before her. Are you here about the necklace? No, said George, feeling terrible for having worried her so. Oh, that mystery has been solved, and it has nothing to do with you. We came for a different reason. Remy was in the postage stamp-size kitchen slurping down a bowl of cereal when they came around the corner. Hi, Remy, said Leo. Remy was so excited to hear Leo's voice, he flipped around in his seat and knocked the cereal bowl over. But he didn't care. None of them did, because Leo didn't waste any time spilling the good news. He told them about Merganser's return, Miss Pompadour, and Miss Sparks. I knew she set us up, said Remy, so excited that he hugged his mother right there in front of everyone. When Leo told them he'd inherited the Whippet Hotel, Remy flipped on an old kitchen radio set to a Spanish station, got up on the kitchen table, and started dancing. He does that sometimes, said Pilar, equally excited, but less showy. Why am I not surprised? Asked Leo. And then he asked Pilar a very important question. Pilar, will you please come work for me? He was hiring his first employee, and it felt good. And live at the Whippet Hotel, too? You can have Miss Sparks' old room. Pilar started to breathe funny. Stand back, said Remy, still dancing, only even more excitedly now. She's gonna lose it. Pilar started to cry. Then she started to dance, her hands over her head. Pretty soon they were all dancing. Even George Powell, who was not known for letting his emotions get away from him. In the end, they decided to leave everything behind, get in the Blacktown car, and depart the old apartment without looking back. Leo promised to send a moving company to get each and every last thing so they could decorate Ms. Sparks' old room and make it their own. Pilar sat in the front seat with George, talking about her plans to make the maid service more efficient. George was immediately impressed with Leo's first hire. Leo and Remy were in the back seat, whispering to each other. Is there a 13th floor like I thought? Asked Remy. There is. I'll show it to you. So that's where you'll stay then, you and your dad, on 13? Leo had thought a lot about this. No, it's not that kind of room. It's all the secret rooms at once, and a library, too. You like libraries, said Remy. I'm happy for you. But where will you stay? We maintenance men like it in the basement, where we can see all the action, said Leo. And it was true. For Leo, the basement was the heart of the Whippet. It was where he and his dad belonged. Thanks, Leo, for everything. You're the best friend I've ever had. Leo pulled out the silver key card and showed it to Remy. Ditto everything you just said, times 10. Merganser was making his final tour through the lobby level of the hotel when he met Remy for the first time. He took a good look at the boy, tapping him once on each shoulder, and declared him the Whippet Hotel's temporary doorman until school started again in September. You'll need someone to help you pass the time, said Merganser. I know how boring it can get now and then. Merganser had changed into a more appropriate iridescent green jacket that was 2 sizes too large. He put his hand inside one of the great pockets, milling around as many objects clanged together, and pulled out a little robot. "This should do," said Merganser, holding it out to Remy. "Blob! Ah, I thought I'd never see you again." "Take good care of him for me, won't you?" asked Merganser, a wisp of a tear in his eye. He was coming near the end, and it was proving harder than he thought it would be to say goodbye. "Of course I will, and I'll take care of Leo too. Don't you worry about a thing." That was it. Then the tears were falling, and Merganser turned for the double helix and one last meeting with the new owner of his hotel. Leo was waiting for him there, as he expected, holding the small orange door open. "One last time just for fun?" asked Leo. "One last time just for fun." Two people never laughed and screamed so loudly as Leo and Merganser de-Whippet on the way up to the roof. It was too short, of course, but neither of them would forget it. The ride was always best when it was the two of them together. "I think Betty will need to stay with the eggs," said Merganser as they peeked around the tree and saw her nesting. "Shall we take the others on their walk?" "Yes, sir," said Leo. "And don't you worry about a thing. Betty is very responsible. She'll be a good mom." "I believe you're right," said Merganser, but it was still hard for him to leave without seeing the ducklings hatch. Mr. Whippet smiled at Leo, thinking once again what a good choice he'd made. They hailed the duck elevator and shooed all the ducks but Betty inside, then crammed in with them. It was a very tight fit, especially for Merganser, whose knees touched the ceiling of the elevator. All the ducks stared up at Merganser inquisitively. "My, but I love a good duck. They will be missed." "If you keep talking like that, I'm going to think you're never coming back," said Leo. If he was hoping for some reassurance, he got none. "I like Remy and his mom. George does too," said Merganser. "Take good care of them, will you?" "Of course I will." When they reached the lobby, Merganser took his walking stick and hat and ushered the ducks out of the elevator. They waddled in a perfect line past Remy and Blop, and the robot began talking about webbed feet and duck's bills. "I'm going to miss our conversations," Merganser said as he passed by, and Blop turned at the sound of his voice, as if somehow he knew it would be the last time he'd hear it. Into the garden they went, the ducks, Mr. Whippet, and Leo Fillmore. Merganser took the black card out of his pocket, the one that had sent the puzzle pieces flying. "If you want to reset the puzzle, click here, here, and then here. It's double-sided." "You mean there are two sides to the puzzle?" "Oh, yes, of course there are. It's quite a secret, the other side. I don't suggest you see it for a while. You'll know when the time is right." They made a wide loop on the soft trails, drinking in the rolling hills of green grass. When they came to the pond, they saw Leo's dad and Pilar talking quietly. "I wonder where that will go, and how you will feel about it," asked Merganser. "I don't know, and I don't know," said Leo. "But I think it's going to be okay." "You're right. It's unwise to meddle in such things. Let nature take its course and all that." "By the way," said Leo, thinking back on the adventures he'd had, "where did you find my mother's ring?" Merganser laughed quietly. "You remember last year, the trip you took?" How could Leo forget? Yankees versus Red Sox, 3-game stand, Fenway Park? Your father wouldn't take an extra penny unless he worked for it. But those Fenway tickets... Merganser whistled through his teeth. Expensive. And the train, the hotel, the hot dogs. He sold you the ring? Oh, no, not sold. Just collateral. There was no use trying to talk him out of it. Leo remembered the extra Saturdays his dad had been working ever since, all so they could take some time off and watch baseball together. They walked farther still toward the great black gate and passed by Mr. Phipps, trimming the green bushes into new and interesting shapes. "Could I request an elephant sometime?" asked Leo. "Remy likes them." "Consider it done," said Mr. Phipps. He smiled, the old black freckles on his dark skin crumpling up against his eyes. "And you, sir, What'll it be? Merganser gazed over the grounds and found, at least for today, that it was just as it should be. I think that one, there on the end, would make a good elephant, when the time is right. As you wish, Mr. Whippet. Keep Captain Rickenbacker occupied, will you? Mr. Phipps held up his finger and wrote a check mark in the air, smiling wistfully. Somehow, without Leo really paying attention to how it had happened, they arrived at the gate to the hotel. It opened slowly, and the black town car pulled up. George Powell rolled down the window. It's time for us to go, he said, as if they were late for something they'd been waiting all their lives to do. Merganser de Whippet took in a deep breath and looked back at his hotel. Then he handed Leo the walking stick and took off his iridescent green jacket. It's 10 sizes too big, said Leo, swimming in the jacket as Merganser draped it over his small shoulders. I have a good feeling you'll grow into it. The ducks started to wander off toward the hotel, and Leo tapped the walking stick on the path. When he turned back to the gate, the car was pulling away. If you need me, Merganser yelled from the back seat, search the field of wacky inventions. The car pulled away and the gate closed. Leo scratched his head because he had no idea where the field of wacky inventions was. But he felt better, knowing he could search for his old friend if he needed him, which he was sure he would. He was 10, and he owned a hotel. Not just any hotel, the Whippet, the strangest hotel in the world. There would be challenges, lots of them. Things would break. Ms. Sparks might try to come back. Someone else would probably try to buy the hotel in order to build a skyscraper on the land. But Leo had his dad and a peaceful memory of his mother. There would be Pilar and Mr. Phipps, Captain Rickenbacker, Theodore Bump, Lily Ann Pompadour, and Betty. And there would be Remy. Leo wouldn't be doing this alone. He'd have plenty of help. Looking up at the Whippet Hotel, he decided what he would do first. He would take his dad, Pilar, Mr. Phipps, and Remy to the roof, and there, in the light of the morning sun, they would wave goodbye to Merganser de Whippet. A duck quacked off in the distance, and Leo took chase, the Whippet Hotel rising to meet him larger and closer as Merganser's green jacket trailed on the grass. Do you think he'll be all right? Asked Merganser. He, too, was looking at the Whippet Hotel. It was getting smaller and smaller as they went. I do, said George. I do indeed. Maybe I should have mentioned the other floors. Oh, I think he probably knows enough for now. Merganser nodded, and a wide smile filled his face. He's a good boy. They both are, George agreed. The Whippet Hotel was almost out of sight, and Merganser began to feel free. He put his head out the window, and he let his wild hair blow in the wind. A good day to be outside with the rabbits, he yelled. Indeed it is, said George. They drove on out of the city, and the Whippet Hotel disappeared from view. And that is the first adventure in the Floor series. I hope you enjoyed it, and I really hope you come back and join me for his second book, 3 Below. If you think this one was crazy, you just might want to take a listen to 3 Below.